No one really prepares you for those oh so scary you might die situations in life. And certainly we all go through scary situations like walking down the street alone at night or getting in a car accident, all things that will definitely raise your adrenaline. But usually you just think about your life choices and you move on. When people think about scuba diving, they think that sharks are the scariest thing that you can encounter. I'm here to tell you that there are way scarier ways that scuba diving can take you out. And I know that scuba diving is relatively safe, but I was one of the ones who unfortunately had a bad experience. It was freshman year of high school and I was learning to scuba dive for one of the elective classes that I took. The scuba diving training way is that you first start in a classroom, you learn everything there is to know about scuba diving, all the gear, everything that you could possibly need to know to live. And then you move to a closed water situation where you practice all of your skills, and it's like you're in a swimming pool, very contained, very small area. And then you do a open water dive, which in our case was a very gross pond. So there was about 10 of us, and we were all walking backwards down to the water, because once you have your 30-pound scuba gear on, you cannot walk forward with flippers or you will fall face first. So as we entered, we saw a no swimming sign, which was the first red flag in my head, that this was not going to go perfectly. And as I was wondering what I got myself into, we actually entered the water, and it was very dark and murky, and there was brown algae and plants all along the bottom, and it was just like things were hitting you as we were swimming down to our little landing pod at the end. And it felt like this was a horror movie from the start. So one of the worst skills for me was when we had to take off our mask and our regulator to stimulate if we had gotten knocked into something and both of them fell off. They wanted to make sure you could recover and you didn't have to be lying for the surface. And I was the worst at this because I cannot stand the feeling of water in my eyes. It just burns, and then there's dryness afterwards, and it's just not a thing that goes well with me. Even though I had a pool as a child, it just never, I always had to have goggles. I always got made fun of for it. So as we were doing the skill, I wanted to make sure that I left my mask off long enough so that I didn't fail the skill, because you had to leave it off for a certain amount of time. And when I put it back on, I realized I left it off for way too long, and I no longer had any air in my lungs to clear the water from both my regulator and my mask. My instructor could clearly see that I was struggling and forced air into my lungs, which also forced all of the water in my mouth into my lungs. And next thing I know, I am ziplining for the surface, and it was all I wanted was to breathe fresh air and cough and get everything out of my lungs. And I had felt a tug on my fin, and I thought, oh my God, this is how I die. And I looked down, and it's my instructor holding me back. And of course, in the moment I wasn't thinking about this, but I would have failed the course if I had made it to the surface. And he ended up coming up face to face with me and helping me go through the steps of recovery and clearing my mask and regulator and I was coughing underwater, and it was not a good experience, but he made sure that I passed. And it all turned out fine in the end, because I had a gorgeous dive to Florida 2 weeks later where I got to see the most amazing animals underwater and the coral and pretty much everything you could want to see, even a few sharks. And that was basically the story of how I almost drowned.